I walked into our living room to find Sophia, my wife of 4 years, showing another expensive gift to Jackson, a 15-year-old student she claimed to be mentoring. Something about their body language set off alarms in my head. Things had been good once back when we were just two ambitious people in love. Now I felt like a stranger in my own home watching my wife shower attention on a troubled teen while his parents cashed our checks. The pieces were starting to fit together, and the picture was darker than I could have imagined. If you are watching this right now, I would really appreciate it if you could hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Trust me, this story is going to be one wild ride. I never expected my life to take such a devastating turn. As a first-generation American with Middle Eastern roots, I had always worked twice as hard to prove myself. My parents came to this country with nothing but hope and determination. They instilled in me the importance of education, hard work, and integrity. Those values guided me through college, where I earned my degree in computer science, and eventually led me to a promising career as a software engineer at a growing tech firm in Seattle. It was at a technology conference in San Francisco where I first met Sophia. She was attending as part of an educational outreach program for her high school where she taught art. I was immediately drawn to her confidence and passion for bringing creative technology into her classroom. We spent the entire evening talking, exchanging ideas and experiences. By the end of the conference weekend, we had exchanged numbers and promised to keep in touch despite living in different cities. Our relationship progressed quickly through video calls and weekend visits. Within 6 months, Sophia applied for and secured a teaching position at a prestigious high school in Seattle. 3 months after she moved, I proposed during a hike to our favorite viewpoint overlooking the city. The wedding was small but beautiful, with our closest friends and family celebrating our union. I remember feeling like the luckiest man alive. The first 2 years of our marriage were everything I had hoped for. We complemented each other perfectly. My analytical nature balanced her artistic spirit. We bought a modest but comfortable house in a good neighborhood with excellent schools. Sophia decorated it beautifully, creating a warm and inviting space we both loved coming home to. I was promoted to senior software engineer, and Sophia was becoming well respected within her school community. We talked about starting a family, planning for 2 children once we had saved enough and felt settled. Life seemed perfectly on track, and I was grateful every day for the beautiful woman I had married. I never imagined how quickly things would change. Jackson entered our lives during Sophia's 3rd year at the high school. She came home one day unusually animated about a new sophomore in her advanced art class. According to Sophia, Jackson had extraordinary talent, but was struggling in his other courses. She described him as a troubled soul with tremendous potential, just needing the right guidance to flourish. I remember how passionately she spoke about wanting to mentor him to help him navigate the challenges of adolescence and develop his artistic skills. Her eyes lit up when she showed me photos of his artwork, and I could see genuine admiration for his talent. I was proud of her dedication to her students and fully supported her desire to make a difference in this young man's life. Sophia explained that Jackson came from a difficult home environment. His parents were present physically but emotionally neglectful. They seemed more interested in their social lives than in their son's well-being or education. Jackson was often left to fend for himself, sometimes without proper meals or adequate supervision. As someone who had grown up with loving, attentive parents, this situation broke my heart. When Sophia suggested establishing a more formal mentorship with Jackson, including after-school art sessions and occasional weekend workshops, I encouraged her. I believed in the power of positive adult influence in a teenager's life. Many of my own successes could be traced back to teachers and mentors who had believed in me. How could I deny another young person that same opportunity? Soon, Sophia was spending several afternoons each week working with Jackson. She would return home, energized, sharing stories of his progress and creative breakthroughs. I listened attentively, happy to see my wife finding such fulfillment in her work. But gradually, the time she spent with Jackson began to increase. Weekend workshops became full days away from home. Phone calls and text messages from him would come at all hours, and Sophia would always respond immediately, regardless of what we were doing. I started feeling uncomfortable with the intensity of their connection, but pushed my concerns aside. After all, she was a teacher dedicated to her student. What could be wrong with that? I told myself I was being selfish for wanting more of my wife's attention and time. Yet a small voice inside me whispered that something about this situation did not feel right. One evening I arrived home earlier than expected and overheard Sophia on the phone with Jackson's mother. The conversation was not about Jackson's art or academic progress, but about money. Sophia was arranging to transfer funds to help with what she called the family's temporary financial difficulties. When I questioned her about it later, she became unusually defensive, accusing me of eavesdropping and not trusting her judgment. That was the first moment I felt a distinct crack in the foundation of our marriage. Not because she wanted to help a student's family, but because of her secretive approach and hostile reaction to my legitimate concerns. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and I caught a glimpse of a side of my wife I had never seen before. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a horrifying revelation. The next few months brought increasingly disturbing discoveries. One night while Sophia was showering, her phone repeatedly chimed with incoming messages. I had never been the type to invade my spouse's privacy, but something compelled me to look. The messages were from Jackson, and they were not what one would expect between teacher and student. There were references to secret meetings, inside jokes, and expressions that seemed inappropriately intimate. My stomach churned as I scrolled through the conversation. When I confronted Sophia, her reaction was explosive. Rather than explaining or apologizing, she turned the situation around, accusing me of being paranoid, controlling, and unreasonable. She claimed I was jealous of her connection with a gifted student and trying to sabotage her career. The gaslighting was so effective that I actually found myself apologizing to her, despite the evidence I had seen with my own eyes. But the seed of doubt had been firmly planted, and I could not ignore it. I began paying closer attention, noting inconsistencies in her stories about where she had been and what she had been doing. Through subtle investigation, I discovered Sophia had been taking Jackson on outings she had never mentioned to me. Movies, art galleries, even overnight trips to neighboring cities for supposed art competitions that I later found did not exist. I decided to meet with Jackson's parents directly, hoping they might share my concerns about the inappropriate nature of this relationship. What I found instead was even more disturbing. They welcomed me into a home that was surprisingly luxurious given their supposed financial difficulties. When I carefully broached the subject of boundaries between teachers and students, they seemed completely unconcerned. Jackson's father casually remarked that Sophia was investing in their son's future, and that such investments sometimes required special arrangements. The mother added that Jackson was mature for his age, and that they trusted Sophia implicitly with their son. Something about their cavalier attitude and choice of words sent chills down my spine. It felt as if they were speaking in code, deliberately avoiding acknowledging what was really happening. Meanwhile, the few times I interacted with Jackson himself, I noticed alarming changes. The bright, creative boy Sophia had initially described now appeared withdrawn and nervous. He avoided eye contact with me and seemed unnaturally anxious in my presence. I noticed physical changes, 2 subtle needle marks on his arms that he quickly covered when he saw me, looking weight loss and pupils that were often constricted or unnaturally dilated. The final straw came during a conversation with one of Sophia's colleagues at a school function. Thinking I already knew, this teacher mentioned being concerned about Sophia taking Jackson to her friend's lake house on weekends. This was news to me. Sophia had told me she was attending teacher workshops during those weekends. When I casually inquired about these friends, the colleague became visibly uncomfortable and quickly changed the subject. Our marriage was deteriorating rapidly. Sophia spent less and less time at home, and when she was present, she was distant and irritable. Any attempt to discuss Jackson or her teaching resulted in accusations and arguments. I tried reaching out to the school administration with my concerns, but Sophia had cultivated an impeccable reputation. They viewed her as a dedicated educator, going above and beyond for her students. One administrator even suggested that perhaps I should be more supportive of my wife's commitment to education. Friends who had once been close to us began to distance themselves. I later learned that Sophia had been telling them I was controlling and emotionally abusive, that I was trying to isolate her from her passion for teaching. The narrative she created painted her as the victim and me as the villain. Most believed her without question, leaving me increasingly alone with my suspicions and fears. Our home began to change as well. Sophia converted our spare bedroom into a private studio, where she would lock herself for hours. Strange people would visit when I was supposedly at work. Individuals she would never introduce to me if I happened to come home unexpectedly. One day, while searching for some tax documents, I discovered a drawer containing alcohol prescription pills and even some substances I could not identify. When confronted, Sophia claimed they were art supplies and accused me of manufacturing evidence against her. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I really as paranoid and controlling as she claimed? Was I imagining the inappropriate relationship with Jackson, the pills and suspicious visitors? Or was my wife manipulating reality to hide something truly sinister? The gaslighting was so effective that I began doubting my own perceptions and judgments. Then came the day that confirmed my worst fears and changed everything. I had a splitting headache and decided to leave work early. As I quietly entered our house, I heard music coming from upstairs. Following the sound to our bedroom, I opened the door to find Sophia and Jackson in a situation that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Jackson appeared disoriented, his speech slurred and movements uncoordinated. There were empty liquor bottles and pills scattered on the nightstand. My presence triggered an immediate and violent reaction from Sophia. She lunged at me, screaming accusations and threats. In her rage, she revealed truths she had previously denied, including details of her ongoing exploitation of Jackson. The boy himself seemed both terrified and resigned, displaying signs of prolonged abuse. When I tried to approach him to tell him I would get help, Sophia became even more aggressive. Within minutes of this confrontation, Jackson's parents arrived supposedly to pick up their son. Instead of being horrified by the scene, they immediately began negotiating. Not for their son's safety, but for their silence. They boldly suggested that for the right price, they could ensure this incident remained private. It was clear in that moment that they had been complicit all along, essentially selling access to their son in exchange for financial benefit. The reality of the situation hit me like a physical blow. This was not just an inappropriate teacher-student relationship. This was a coordinated exploitation of a vulnerable minor, with his own parents acting as facilitators. I realized I had been living with a predator, and my silence and denial had allowed the abuse to continue. In that moment, I made the decision that would change all our lives. I asked Jackson and his parents to leave, told Sophia our marriage was over, and called the police. The aftermath was immediate and brutal. Sophia was briefly taken in for questioning but released pending investigation. She wasted no time launching a counteroffensive, accusing me of fabricating allegations out of jealousy and resentment over her close relationships with students. Jackson's parents backed her story, claiming I had always been irrationally suspicious of Sophia's teaching career and had threatened to ruin her if she did not quit. The school placed Sophia on paid administrative leave, but issued a statement of support, citing her exemplary teaching record. Many colleagues publicly defended her, describing her as a dedicated educator who went above and beyond for her students. Only a handful of people expressed doubts or concerns, and they were quickly silenced by the overwhelming support for Sophia. Meanwhile, my life was falling apart. Rumors and gossip spread rapidly through our social circle and beyond. I received threatening phone calls and messages from strangers who believed I was persecuting an innocent teacher. My employers, concerned about negative publicity, suggested I take a leave of absence. When I refused, arguing that I had done nothing wrong, they found reasons to criticize my work, until I was eventually terminated. Jackson's parents took their harassment to another level. They would park outside our house, our former friends' homes, or my workplace. They would approach anyone who knew me, sharing Sophia's version of events and warning people about my allegedly unstable behavior. They filed a restraining order against me, based on false claims further damaging my reputation and limiting my ability to gather evidence or speak with potential witnesses. I found myself alone, unemployed, and increasingly desperate. There were days when giving up seemed like the only option. The system designed to protect victims appeared to be working against me, and more importantly, against Jackson. I questioned whether coming forward had been the right decision, whether I should have found another way to address the situation. The weight of ostracism and false accusations pushed me to the brink of despair. During my darkest moment, sitting in a small apartment I had rented, after being forced to sell our house to cover legal fees, I made a crucial decision. If the system was failing, I would need to work outside it, or at least find a way to make it work as intended. I could not allow Sophia and Jackson's parents to continue their abuse. I would fight back, not just for my own vindication, but for Jackson and any other potential victims. I began methodically documenting everything related to the case. Every interaction, every rumor, every piece of evidence I could legally obtain. I created a secure digital archive of text messages, emails, photos, and notes from my time with Sophia. I recorded phone conversations when legal kept detailed logs of harassment incidents and meticulously organized financial records showing payments to Jackson's family. Though most of our former friends had abandoned me, I found an unexpected ally in Rachel, a school counselor who had previously expressed concerns about Sophia's relationships with certain students. She had been silenced by administration, but secretly harbored doubts. Rachel could not openly support me, but provided crucial background information and suggested other staff members who might have witnessed concerning behavior. Through careful digital forensics on our shared computer and cloud accounts, Sophia had forgotten to disconnect. I uncovered disturbing evidence. There were photos, messages, and documents revealing not just her relationship with Jackson, but suggestions of a network of adults involved in similar exploitation of minors. Sophia had been careful, but not careful enough. Small digital breadcrumbs created a trail that became impossible to ignore. The most shocking discovery came from our financial records. Regular payments to Jackson's parents had been disguised as charitable donations or business expenses. There were also payments to other individuals whose names I did not recognize, but would later discover were connected to the case. Hotel reservations, car rentals, and purchases that aligned with weekends Sophia claimed to be at teaching workshops provided further evidence of deception. The investigation took a physical and emotional toll. I barely slept, lost weight, and suffered from constant anxiety. Yet each new piece of evidence strengthened my resolve. This was no longer just about clearing my name. It was about exposing a network of predators and enablers who had been operating with impunity, protected by reputation and social standing. Just as I was compiling my evidence to present to a new detective who had taken interest in the case, I received an anonymous call. The young male voice identified himself only as a friend of Jackson's, someone who had witnessed the abuse firsthand. He was terrified of being identified but felt compelled to speak out after learning that Jackson had been hospitalized following a particularly violent incident. According to this anonymous source, Sophia had been hosting parties at a friend's lake house gatherings where Jackson and occasionally other minors were given alcohol and drugs before being abused by multiple adults. Jackson's parents were fully aware of these events and received payment for their son's attendance. The parties had been going on for over a year, escalating in frequency and intensity. The source explained that Jackson had recently tried to refuse participation, which resulted in a severe beating by Sophia and one of her male friends. Jackson had been left unconscious and was later dumped at an emergency room with a fabricated story about a skateboarding accident. His toxicology report showed high levels of various substances, and his injuries were inconsistent with an accident. This information catalyzed the investigation. Armed with my organized evidence and this new lead, I approached the detective who had shown interest in the case. Unlike previous law enforcement contacts, Detective Martinez took my claims seriously. She had worked in crimes against minors for 15 years and recognized the patterns I described. Within days, a proper investigation was launched. As authorities began their work, another victim came forward. A former student named Tyler claimed Sophia had groomed him 2 years earlier before I had met her. He had been silenced through a combination of threats, shame, and a small payment to his single mother. Now 20 and in college, he had been following the rumors about Sophia and decided it was time to speak his truth. The case broke open like a dam. With 2 victims, substantial evidence, and a motivated detective, the tide began to turn. Sophia, perhaps sensing the inevitable, attempted to flee the country, but was apprehended at the airport. Jackson's parents, realizing they were implicated, tried to cut a deal by offering information about other adults involved in the abuse network. Their attempt to save themselves only provided more evidence of their complicity. The media, which had initially portrayed Sophia as a dedicated teacher being persecuted by a jealous husband, now reported on the growing evidence and additional victims. The same school administrators who had defended her were suddenly claiming they had always had concerns. Former friends reached out pretending they had never doubted me. Their sudden support felt hollow, but I was too focused on the case to dwell on past betrayals. The trial process was grueling but necessary. Sophia faced multiple serious charges related to child exploitation, drug distribution to minors, and assault. Jackson's parents were charged with child endangerment, complicity in sexual abuse of a minor, and extortion. Several of Sophia's friends were also indicted based on evidence uncovered during the investigation. During this period, Jackson remained in hospital, first for his physical injuries, then for addiction treatment and psychological care. I learned he had been placed in foster care, his parents having lost custody due to their criminal charges. Despite everything, I felt profound sadness for this young man, whose life had been so terribly damaged by adults who should have protected him. 3 days before the trial was set to begin, I received an unexpected visitor. Jackson's father, released on bail, appeared at my door. The arrogant man who had once essentially sold his son now looked broken. He begged me to alter my testimony, to suggest that he and his wife had been unaware of the full extent of Sophia's actions. In exchange, he offered information that would guarantee Sophia's conviction without implicating them as deeply. I refused his proposal, but recorded the conversation. This final piece of evidence sealed their fate. The trial proceeded with overwhelming evidence against all parties involved. I testified for 3 days, presenting a clear timeline of events, supported by digital and financial evidence. Though Sophia's attorney attempted to portray me as vindictive and unreliable, the facts spoke for themselves. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all major counts. Sophia received a 20-year sentence, without possibility of parole for 10 years. Jackson's parents received 8 years each. The other adults involved received various sentences according to their level of participation. The judge specifically commended the thoroughness of the evidence I had gathered, noting that without my persistence, these predators might have continued their abuse. In the years following the trial, I focused on rebuilding my life from the ground up. I relocated to Portland, where I eventually secured a position with a software company known for their ethical business practices. I found a small but comfortable apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a stark contrast to the house I had shared with Sophia. This new space became my sanctuary, a place to heal and reflect. The trauma of the experience had left deep wounds. I struggled with trust issues, anxiety, and occasional bouts of depression. Recognizing I could not heal alone, I began working with a therapist, specializing in betrayal trauma. The weekly sessions provided a safe space to process my grief, anger, and lingering doubts. Slowly, I began to recognize that I was not responsible for Sophia's actions or for failing to identify her true nature earlier. As part of my healing journey, I connected with advocacy groups supporting survivors of abuse. Initially seeking support for myself, I eventually became a volunteer, using my experience to help others navigate similar situations. Sharing my story in support groups helped me transform my pain into purpose. Each time I spoke, the burden seemed to lighten slightly, replaced by a sense of meaning and connection. I learned that Jackson had been placed with a supportive foster family, and was making progress in his recovery. Through proper channels, and with the approval of his therapist, I established a trust fund for his future education. I wanted him to know that his worth was not defined by the adults who had failed him, that he deserved a chance at a better future. The gesture was not about assuaging guilt, but about affirming his value as a human being worthy of care and opportunity. The experience had fundamentally changed my perspective on many things. I became more attentive to subtle warning signs in interpersonal dynamics, more willing to question situations that did not feel right. I learned that predators often hide behind respected roles in institutions, using their positions to access victims and silence doubters. Most importantly, I recognized the courage required to stand alone against a tide of disbelief and accusation when fighting for truth. Building trust in new relationships proved challenging but not impossible. I formed a small circle of close friends who knew my story and respected my boundaries. These authentic connections based on honesty and mutual respect gradually restored my faith in human connection. I discovered that while traumatic experiences change us, they need not define or limit us permanently. 5 years after the trial, I received a letter postmarked from Boston. Inside was a note from Jackson, now 20, and enrolled in art school. He wrote briefly but powerfully about his ongoing recovery, his determination to reclaim his passion for art, and his gratitude for my intervention years earlier. The letter included a small watercolor painting of a phoenix rising, a symbol of rebirth that spoke volumes about his journey. That letter affirmed what I had come to believe through my own healing process. While we cannot erase painful chapters from our lives, we can determine how those chapters shape our ongoing story. Jackson was not allowing his trauma to define his future, just as I had refused to let betrayal and injustice determine mine. His resilience inspired me to continue moving forward in my own life. Today, I lead a quieter but more authentic life. I have found joy in simple pleasures, rediscovered old hobbies, and cultivated new interests. I remain cautious in relationships, but no longer paralyzed by fear. The hypervigilance that once dominated my daily existence has subsided, replaced by a more balanced awareness. I have learned to trust my instincts while remaining open to genuine connection. My experience has taught me that protecting the vulnerable requires both individual courage and community response. When systems fail, as they often do, personal conviction must fill the gap. Speaking truth in the face of denial and manipulation is never easy, but the alternative, allowing abuse to continue unchallenged, is unconscionable. Each of us has the capacity to intervene when we witness wrongdoing, to stand firm when easier paths present themselves. I still think about Sophia, sometimes wondering what combination of factors shaped her into the person she became. I feel no hatred toward her now, only a profound sadness for the destruction she caused and the potential she wasted. My focus remains on supporting survivors and preventing similar situations through education and advocacy. The energy once consumed by anger now fuels constructive action. Life continues to unfold in unexpected ways. The painful chapter with Sophia no longer dominates my story, though it has certainly informed who I am today. I have found that resilience is not about returning to who we were before trauma, but about integrating our experiences into a new, often stronger self. The cracks may always be visible, but they can be filled with wisdom, compassion, and renewed purpose. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. If you found any value in what I have shared, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. I would really appreciate hearing your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand alone for what was right, even when nobody believed you? How did you find the strength to persevere? Your experiences might help others facing similar challenges. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply tell the truth, even when the world is not ready to hear it. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.